Today we're making a Crumbl cinnamon roll cookie copycat recipe. I love these things, and they really do match the way that Crumbl cookies have that melt in your mouth center, and even the way that the cookies break apart is unique to Crumbl cookies. They're really sweet, but they're counteracted by some of that cream cheese frosting that you have on the top. And then you also have a cinnamon roll icing or topping that you place on the cookies before you bake them. So they're really fun. They take about 1.5 hours probably to make from start to finish. And once you're done, you have just a really incredible cookie. So let's get started. We'll be adding our dry ingredients first, starting here with 1.5 cups of flour, followed by 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, 1/8 teaspoon cinnamon, and last 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then I'm just going to give that all a mix to combine thoroughly, and then we're going to set this aside and move on to our wet ingredients. Starting with our wet ingredients, I have 1 stick of butter at room temp. I would recommend using room temp here. Cold butter could mess with the baking times. Adding into that 1/2 cup sugar, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Then I'm just pushing that down the sides of the bowl to make sure that everything is getting mixed together thoroughly. Giving that another mix, and for me, this whole process of mixing and then wiping down the sides of the bowl took about 4 minutes to get it to the fluffy state that I was looking for. Then once that butter and sugar is nice and fluffy, I'm going to add into it 1 egg and start mixing that again. Then 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/4 teaspoon lemon juice, and then we're going to mix that all again until we get that incorporated. After mixing thoroughly, we'll begin by adding in our dry ingredients. So with this flour mixture, I'm just adding in about half at a time, and then I'm waiting for everything in the mixer to start to look wet again, and then I'll add in the rest of the flour. It's important here that when you're adding your flour, you don't overmix. So once I get the last of this flour in and it starts to disappear, that's right about when I'll stop with my mixing. And you can see inside of the mixer here the point in which I stop. And don't be worried if this cookie dough looks a bit dry. It will do that, but it will bake up just fine. You don't need to do anything else to it afterwards. So here, after we have this cookie dough, I'm going to set it aside and work on our cinnamon topping. So I have 3 tablespoons of room temp butter. Again, it being room temp is important. Adding in 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, and then lastly, 2 tablespoons of flour. We're going to start to mix this together, and as I was mixing it, I realized that the butter was still a little bit hard for my liking, so I went ahead and threw this in the microwave for about 10 seconds. I'd recommend, if you're finding that the butter is a bit too hard, doing 5 to 10 seconds. So after I did that, it was the right temperature and mixed up easily just by hand. And this is the kind of consistency you're looking for with that cinnamon sugar mixture. This recipe makes 7 cookies, so I'm going to be taking my cookie dough and dividing it into 75-gram dough balls and then placing them on my plate to freeze later. After you weigh them out, you'll want to make sure that you roll them around to make them as round as you possibly can. It's not entirely necessary that you weigh these. You can just eyeball them, but you will have some variance when you bake the cookies. Then moving to the cinnamon sugar mixture, we're going to divide that into 17-gram portions and then place that on top of the cookies like I'm doing here. Again, you can just eyeball it, but your baking might be a little less consistent. And this is what it should look like once they're all topped. Now I'm going to place these in the freezer for 15 minutes, and at the same time you'll want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. After your cookies have been in the freezer for 15 minutes, we'll take them out and place them on a parchment-lined baking sheet. trying to give them as much space as possible. After you've added them to the baking sheet, these are ready to go off to the oven to bake for 14 to 15 minutes. And this is what they should look like after they're done baking. Don't worry if that icing or that topping has gone off the sides of the cookie. I find I actually like it because it gets a bit crispy and it adds some nice texture to the cookies. Moving on to our cream cheese frosting, I'm adding in 1 tablespoon of room temp butter, 2 ounces of room temp cream cheese, giving that a mix and adding in 1/2 teaspoon vanilla extract. And lastly, 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. Then you'll want to give this a good mix. Make sure that everything's combined and scraping off that powdered sugar from the edges of the bowl. This is what it should look like once it's done. Here I'm prepping a piping bag, and you definitely don't have to use this if you don't have one. You could use something like a Ziploc bag with the corner cut off. Should still work just fine. I'm taking the edges of the bag and placing it over a cup here. Just makes putting the cream cheese frosting inside of the piping bag just a little bit cleaner. Once that's ready to go, we can start piping onto these cookies. The way I do it is going from the inside out, but you can really pipe whatever kind of pattern you're looking to do on these cookies. And then once you're done piping the rest of these cookies, you have successfully made some Crumbl cinnamon roll cookies. If you try this recipe, I'd love to know how it goes for you, and if you have any other recipes you'd like me to try, feel free to add those down below in the comments.